YouTube, welcome back to another episode of Miles and Bodyweight Training. Today's episode is going to be a walkthrough with me in the gym environment. Just going to go through all of the training for today. Yeah, I'm ready because I haven't trained for like nearly a week, so I'm a bit pumped, so let's go. We're going to basically start with the warm-up, as always. Ultimately, the warm-up is getting more and more important the more complex the skills get. It's almost like I would normally think that the stronger you get, the less you would need to be able to have to warm up to perform the skills, but I find there's not a direct correlation between the intensity of certain skills and how strong you are from cold. Ultimately, the handstand is what I want to be able to achieve. Just wake up in the morning and do a handstand effortlessly, but that's still, I think, a way away yet. But yeah, so here I'm just going through it's more joint articulation. That's what I'm trying to achieve from the warm-up. So you can see me here doing shoulders, just stretching out that shoulder joint as much as I can, just using my body weight to hang, and there's a little bit there of activation. I always find that activating the muscle group or the joint area is a little bit more productive than just stretching alone. And then we've got to keep those wrists healthy. You'll notice here that every time I'm doing something on the wrist, whether this wrist extension here or just general stretching of the wrist, my arm's always locked and straight. The idea for that is that it's a little bit more intense on the wrists themselves, but also, again, like I always preach, I'm still training that straight arm. Everything I do, no matter, even if something as basic as stretching, is I'm maintaining the body shapes and of all the rest of my movements. And there's just a little bit of neck and scapular articulation, just doing some work there just to really loosen everything up. Also, it gives me a good idea before the session starts to see exactly what's tight. So yeah, this one I don't normally do, but I thought that I would just work on the shoulders. I think my shoulders are taking a bit more of a beating these days, so it's just nice to get them thoroughly stretched and conditioned to what we're about to do. Here I'm stretching obviously my hamstrings and the lower back, trying to get into that real full pike position. It's important because even though I'm just doing handstands and more upper body weight movements, a lot of my work is pressing into handstands, and the more mobile and flexible you are on the hamstrings, the easier it is to perform that move. And again here I'll be straddling into the handstand, so having good sort of adductor range of motion is going to help me perform a better straddle, and it won't look as stiff and clunky. I try to be as elegant as physically possible. So actually this is something that I've on this session alone I thought I would try and optimize. So I'm trying to basically kill two birds with one stone by warming up adequately. Normally what I would have done here is just jump straight into some handstand training, but I thought I would use this portion of my day-to-day training to just activate with a little bit more resistance. So you can see there that I'm piked with my legs raised, and just going through scapular activation. And again, this helps when you're in handstand to be able to push and extend through your body towards the ceiling. This obviously reduces the weight, so it's a good sort of middle ground to be able to do this before my handstands, just to introduce a little bit of resistance. And then here, after that first session, or that first set should I say, I basically doing shoulder taps, and all this does is transfer all the weight from that same movement but into one shoulder. So it's like another progression onto just working on the shoulders and getting that sort of activated and ready. all the time, trying to keep my legs as straight as possible, my arms locked out, and also I'm trying to push that scapula away from me so that I'm in an optimal position for the handstand. Again, I'm trying to always work on, you know, making sure that everything's bang on form. So yeah, phase one into the handstands. Like I mentioned in the beginning part of the video, is I've had like a week off, and I think at this point I'm relatively competent at doing handstands, but it just goes to show, even at this level, having a week off, you almost have to sort of reintroduce your brain to the balancing side of things, as well as not having that sort of element of fatigue in the body. It's weird because you're so fresh, you're so aware of everything, so it almost feels like it's counterproductive. But you know, I think with the handstand, it's a very much a skill movement, so it helps if you're neurologically fresh, I find. But I'm just again here, just figuring out what's going on. Obviously this is sped up and it's in double time, and I thought I'd do that deliberately. Not only would I do that because otherwise it would take a long time, but just give you an idea of how frequently I do handstands in a typical session. You know, I tend not to. The more you go into it, the more fatigue you're going to get. The idea for me is to be as fresh as physically possible each time I do the handstand. So there's a little bit of recovery in between each handstand. It does kind of take a lot out of you, especially when you're doing stuff like this and you're pressing into it. It's a nice bit of skill and strength. So, you know, just getting to the handstand from that position takes a lot more out of you. Something I will actually add to pressing into the handstand, I tell a lot of people this, is I have so much more control when I press into the handstand, because you're having to recruit everything in order to do the press for a start. But then you get to the top of the handstand, you've just already got so much control, as opposed to kicking up. It's a lot harder to control that, I find. So here I switch to the parallettes, primarily because my wrists were starting to hurt a little bit. So switching to the parallettes takes the pressure off the wrist a little bit. And I'm also having a bit of fun here, just hopping up into a tuck. You know, I want to be quite good at hand balancing, so ultimately, you know, I just try to get into the handstand as many different ways, and you know, it just introduces a new stimulus basically. You can see me here taking some time in between, just getting a feel for it, and then do another one, pop into it. Yeah, definitely was struggling a little bit with handstands on this session. Okay, so moving on to skill work. I thought I would chuck this in. Again, this session was basically, I'm just putting in as much as I can until I go bang. So this is me just getting a feel for the rings, see where I'm at, so I know what I can try and do within the next sort of block, see how that feels. And I thought now, as part of the title to this video, I now achieve my first muscle up on the rings, probably making this a little bit harder than it should be by taking the weight off and then jumping into it. So it's obviously not the cleanest of muscle ups, and I thought I'd chuck in an L-sit there because it helps me stop swinging. But yeah, it's a new skill that I've learned, which I'm actually super happy about. And then we continue with the rest of the skill work, which is this little complex that I do, L-sit to dips, because the dips aren't challenging enough anymore and the L-sit on its own isn't as challenging. So I thought I would couple them together and do about 2 or 3 sets of that. And ultimately what we saw at the end there was the sort of iron cross progression. So onto the strength phase, and as you can see, I have the 10 kilo weighted vest on, and I do a couple of variations of this pull-up. So this is activating more of the bicep, which I like. I don't often do enough. I sort of stopped doing bicep curls. I'm just going to try and hit it like that. And then here's a sort of slightly wider grip pull-up. And again, by this time, after everything I've done so far, I'm starting to feel a lot of the fatigue. So yeah, I think I managed like 4 here. But yeah, trying to make sure that everything's integral, the dish exists, trying to keep that body tension nice and tight. And then as a drop set, I do the slow negative, which just finishes off that set. So here, if the push-ups aren't hard enough for you with the 10 kilo weight vest on, I thought I'd add 8 kilo sandbag to my neck. It's actually sitting quite high, but if you don't have anyone to help you, it's a bit hard to get this on your back. But anyway, it's still adding weight. Take this away from the press up. Look at the pivot from the feet on the floor to the shoulders. That straight line is maintained. Struggling to get the weight off my back there, but again, introducing another drop set by taking off the 8 kilo sandbag, and again, now I've only got 10 kilos, and just again finishing off sort of to failure on a press up. My failure is a little bit different. It's like I could keep a couple more in the bag, but I like to stay fresh-ish for the next set. So I did about 3 sets of that ultimately. So this is me working on my straight arm strength. It's the dish with the straight arm dumbbell raises. I think that's about 9 kilograms there. Haven't actually done this for a while, this variation, but it proves as well, because normally I think 10, 11 kilo, 12 kilos was my best at that, but I've gone back down to 9 kilos per side, and that was tough. That was actually quite tough. Doesn't look it, but it was. And then we go back to handstand. That was unnecessary, but yeah, what I like to do here is I like to go over the handstand again. What I find is that when I'm warmed up and my wrists are really warm and everything is sort of working, I reattempt the handstand. Now the only downside to doing this is that my shoulders can become very tight, and as you can see here, which is why I deliberately put it in the side profile, is that you see a real lack of mobility in the shoulders, and this is almost causing that sort of slightly arched back banana handstand. It's not that bad, but it's not where I want it to be, put it that way. And this is primarily because my shoulders are so fatigued by this point, I can't extend through the body and create distance between my scapula, so ultimately I'm squashed in the position and I can't open the shoulders as much. I'm going to rethink how I do this, because ultimately if I'm not doing the handstand at this stage in an optimal fashion, there's not really any point in doing it. I'm not teaching the body anything valuable. All I'm doing is creating fatigue and training some form of capacity in my mental state, but I don't really need help with the capacity in my mental state. So I'm probably going to switch this area of my training, depending on the day and how I feel, to the wall, and I'll take it to the wall, so that eliminates the balance side of it, but I can then focus on pushing through and extending to create a space behind the scapula, so that I could do an effective handstand. So I'm just really, the more I get fatigued, the more you see the shoulders don't open up and nothing sort of works. I like to be as elegant as physically possible, and just I'm not sure, it doesn't look very good. And then I tried some attempt at a pirouette in the straddle, but the body just says no, we're not doing that today. Trying to catch it again. Sometimes I like that, and if I mess up on the handstand, I'll try and catch it again, and it helps me just be aware of my surroundings and help me adjust whilst in the handstand. It's good to have that sort of control. So because of the lack of shoulder mobility, I've moved on to the Japanese handstand. Now the nice thing about this, once you learn how to press and get off the floor, is that it doesn't require as much mobility in the shoulders, because your arms are in a much freer extended position, so I can just focus on this unusual balance, which isn't normal handstand. But I still want to do the handstand for this session, and I'm not saying no. So I'm finding something else to do, and the Japanese this is at least a progression, because my hands, if I'm honest, aren't wide enough to make it, I think, an official Japanese handstand, but it's a good progression, and I'm getting a lot more stable and better at doing this variation of handstand, and one day when I become a master at hand balancing, hopefully I'll have this in the bag and then I can just execute at will. But at least my pressing to the handstand is strong, and here I've given up. So ultimately, finishing up the session now is my cool down phase. This is nothing crazy, it's what I call everyday stretching, which is ultimately just going through the joints in the lower part just to get some movement in the groin and the hips and just the hamstrings, and just getting everything sort of working. So I spend a little bit of time here. Again, this is in double speed, so some of the movements look a bit weird, but you know, it's just going through the range of motion, just finding out what's tight and just trying to relieve it, staying relaxed as much as possible, and just being really free ultimately. I mean, this split is my favoured side, left leg in front, and you know, for the first sort of attempt at it, it's not so bad. But this is the right leg, and it's actually getting a lot better. The only issue I have with this side of my front split is that my left leg at the hip is very impinged, and it wants to sort of rotate outwards, and yeah, it's not that good for, you know, I'm trying to stay strict where the splits are concerned. Working a little bit of hamstring there. My hamstrings are pretty good, so I tend not to spend too much time on the hamstrings, but I do want to develop this pancake, which I'm actually I was pretty impressed with that. That's quite wide and quite low for me. Chest is more or less all the way to the ground, but I'm just using the pancake actually to develop my box split without actually doing the intensity work of the box split. And you can see here that the pancake, when it goes wide enough, it starts to basically turn into the box split. So yeah, I'm just enjoying that. You see me digging my elbows into my knees. This is really me just sort of pushing and allowing my back to twist. So I like, you know, just find little intuitive ways to try and relax and make the stretch a little bit more intense where it needs to be. I'm just working on the pike. Just really working on that groin, trying to hit as many different angles and variations of stretching as physically possible. I'm just looking into no man's land there. Sometimes I have no idea what I'm looking at. That shaking looks like I have some sort of weird twitch, but just remember that the video's in double time. So yeah, last pancake, and this time I actually got probably wider than I've ever got before, and I was like, it feels pretty comfortable. Obviously not as much forward range, but you know, ultimately it was not a bad pancake. And there's that jitter again from the shaking. So there you have it. That's my latest training video, literally, of my progression to date. I like how it's coming along. Everything that I talk about in previous videos with, you know, keeping a real basic way of training, keeping body tension, all that stuff has really sort of come through. And today again, you've seen me develop another skill in the muscle up. But yeah, I'm incredibly fatigued now. That was a big session, I think, kind of. And this always happens every time there's a break in my training for whatever reason. I come back and I'm relatively fresh, and that's really the time to sort of maximize how hard you can go. It won't last for very long, but you know, and then there'll be another break for whatever reason. So it's just nice to be able to go crazy into everything, and you know, and it not be too damaging, but ultimately my body is now wrecked. So I'm gonna go back and eat and recover. Maybe a session tomorrow, we'll see. But yeah, thanks very much for watching again. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you guys soon with another video. Ciao.